Welcome back to our 25 by 25 challenge. We're back for the newest edition, number 21 of 25. This one's in Buffalo, New York. We closed on it, I think, last Wednesday. So at this point, we've been closed for a couple of days. And man, some crazy things have already happened on this one. I can't wait to break it all down for you guys. This one is a little less creative than our normal means of buying deals. So what we did is we purchased this property from another wholesaler for cash. So we actually got this other wholesaler paid. I think he made $15,000 as an assignment fee, which is great for him. We got the price that we needed and a great deal in an area that we know is gonna be really good for our strategy. What we're gonna do with this property in Buffalo, New York is what's called a lease option. And I talk about this strategy more in other videos, what a lease option is, how it provides home ownership opportunity for people that participate in this strategy, and then how the investor actually profits from this strategy. So what we're gonna do with this property is what's called a lease option. And what this means is exactly kind of what it says. The tenant is going to lease the property for a certain period of time. So in this example, we're gonna sign a 3-year lease with a prospective buyer. The option means the right to buy for a specific determined price at the end of the lease. Hence, lease option to buy. So they lease for a specific period of time. So they sign a lease, they pay rent. At the end of that lease, they have the option to buy for a fixed price. Right now, the buyer and I decide on a price that we feel comfortable with for the future value of the property. So keep in mind, it's not today's value, it's the future value of the property. So we bought this deal for $125,000. We raised money from a private investor who funded this deal for us. We actually closed it in 2 weeks from contract to close. Really fast process. We raised from this private investor $145,000, and we did this because the property needs some work. So we're total in the deal for $145,000 from a PML. PML stands for private money lender. So when we fix up this property, comparable properties in the area are going for about $225,000 ARV. ARV stands for after repair value. When we're doing a lease option strategy, we do not need to be ARV for the property, because typically when you do strategies like this, people are gonna come in and do their own thing anyway. So what we wanna do is we wanna make it functionable, livable, and we want people to be comfortable when they move into the house, that it's a blank canvas for them to basically just do what they wanna do. So we are not trying to rehab the 225, because if we rehab the 225, that would be on par with something like a flipper would do. What a flipper does is they rehab to ARV, or after repair value, because they want to maximize the profit on the sale of the property of today's price. What we're doing is a little bit different. So the house now that we're all in for 145 is what we call grandma's house, meaning it's livable, but it's really old and antiquated. So what we're gonna actually do to this property, and what we've already done, is trash it out completely, because it's covered in trash inside and out. We bought this house on what's called an estate sale. So the owner of the property died, and it was inherited by their heir, which in this case was one of their children. And we bought the property from the heir of the estate and cleared out the debt from underneath the property with the cash that we brought to the closing table. So like I said, traditional cash sale, that's the acquisition component of it. The property condition itself is not terrible. It needs new carpets, which we're gonna do. The furnace needs to be serviced, which we're going to do. It needs new appliances, which the end buyer will bring. It needs new paint. So just your average cosmetic touch up. Just to summarize, paint, carpet, trash out. Really the main components of the things that we're gonna do here. On top of that, we're also gonna have to service the furnace, make sure that that's working and active, because right now it's November, and if you guys know anything about Buffalo, New York, it is going to be cold there by the time we find a lease option tenant for that in January. They're gonna want a furnace that works, so we're gonna deliver that for them. From here, it might be a good time to pause on the strategy and tell a quick story about where we're at in the process so far. So we closed on this deal last Wednesday, and the seller for the property was trying to go back to the property multiple times to get and collect all her items from the property that she wanted. And we were working with a wholesaler, so I, as the buyer, had limited control over how that actually facilitated. But she had like 6 months before the estate settled to close on the deal, according to her and according to the person that I bought the deal from. At closing, it was kind of weird how she hadn't taken all the stuff out of the property yet. A few days later, when we went to go trash out the property, she gave us a call and she was like, hey, we're gonna go ahead and come back to the property. If that's okay, we wanna take the remaining stuff that we wanted in the property. So, okay, whatever, no problem. So I told my trash out guys, hey guys, listen, the previous owner is gonna come early in the morning. She's gonna come get her stuff and she's gonna get out of your hair. Because I want them to be done with it, and we closed on the property already. I wanna be courteous. I know she's had forever to kind of get the stuff out of the property. For some reason, she can't specify or hadn't actually done that already. As soon as she gets to the property, she starts causing a giant scene. And she brings her friends, her boyfriend, and things like that. And the cops actually had to get involved and issue a citation for her for trespassing on the property because it got bad. So sometimes this is just some of the things that you deal with when you're buying properties. Crazy sellers are pretty common, unfortunately, especially in estate sales. Fortunately, we were able to get the things out of the property that she claimed that she wanted, because that was the whole point of her going in the first place. Me not being there is kind of hard to tell what happened or what occurred after that, besides what I was told, is that the cops had to get involved. But luckily the property is cleared out and ready to go at this point. And we're ready to help find a new buyer an option to now own a property themselves. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put about $8,000 to $10,000 into this property. And we think that that'll bring the value of today's pricing up to about $190,000. $190,000 is the value of the property once we complete our, we'll call it rent-ready repair level of work. So remember, 190 is what the fair market would be willing to pay for this property today, but with a lease option strategy, they're paying tomorrow's prices, not today's, because they have the option to buy it in the future. So what we're gonna do with this property is we're gonna find a lease option tenant. Fair market rent for this property is probably around $1,900. So what we like to do is increase that by 20% over what fair market is, up to that amount. And if they pay that amount over, so let's say fair market rent is $1,900 and 20% over that is roughly $2,400. That seems a little bit high for us. We'd love to be in the $2,100 to $2,200 range. And if they agree to that, we'll actually be able to offer them an equity incentive to pay a higher payment. Meaning if they pay $2,100, we might contribute $100 a month over the course of their lease towards their equity. So when they buy us out at the end of the lease, if they execute their option, now they have additional payments that they've made every single month that'll contribute towards that equity when they buy us out. So let's just say that in 3 years, we agree that the future price of this property is today's ARV price. So their option price to execute is $225. So they'll sign a lease at $2,100 for 3 years with the option to execute the purchasing of the property from us at the end of their lease for $225,000. That's kind of how the lease option structure works. And we're looking to do all of this before we get into the next phase of the property, which is the refinance phase. Like we said, the property would be worth probably about $190,000 at this time, and we're getting $200 above fair market rent, $2,100. So here's are the two figures of today's value and what we're getting here. What this means is that if we handed a lease to a bank to refinance the property and pay off our private money lender, or as much of the private money lender's money as we possibly can to be left into the deal for as minimal as we can, this is a really good place to start, because if we refinance into today's rate, which is something like 6.5%, our total monthly payment, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance is around $1,450. PITI. PITI stands for principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. So there is quite the spread between those two numbers here, which is what DSCR lenders, banks that are investor friendly, like to see, because they're what we call asset-based lenders rather than based on your personal borrower status. They base the ability to refinance or finance the property based off the asset's performance. So because there's such a big spread between these two numbers, the bank actually considers it a more safe investment. So they're able to give some more favorable terms on something like this. So something that we might see is an 80% loan to value, meaning that we can take out, if it's worth 190K in the bank's eyes, as is, we can refinance up to 80% of that $190,000. So 80% of $190,000 is $152,000. Now, if you remember, when we bought this deal, we borrowed $145,000 from our lender, meaning that if we are able to obtain this 80% loan to value, when we refinance, if the bank agrees of the 190 evaluation, that means that we're actually gonna get $7,000 more on the refinance versus what we owe. Meaning that money is actually us getting paid to buy this property, $7,000, which is crazy. And this is a method of financing called the BRRRR. Ours is a little bit skewed because we do lease options, but it stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. So that's the acronym, that's what it stands for. And basically what we're just doing here in simple terms is just refinancing the property, pulling out our equity, and putting debt service in place that makes sense for us. So given this is the spread, this is the loan to value the bank might give, today's interest rates will probably get somewhere around a 6.5% as one of the more favorable things that we're gonna be getting on this deal because it's such a good deal. The last cherry on top is that when the lease option buyer, when they sign for that $2,100 lease, to secure their option, they need to put down what's called an option deposit. So typically it could range anywhere depending on the value of the property. In this case, $190,000 is today's value. It could range anywhere from $5,000 all the way up to $15,000. And what that option deposit is, let's just call it $10,000, is just to secure the right to execute that option in the future. It doesn't guarantee anything besides that. It just locks in that option so that they have the opportunity at the end of the lease period to execute that option. Now, if they do decide to execute the option, I typically take this 10K and I contribute it towards the option price. So that option price would be reduced by 10K if they decide to execute that option. If they don't decide to execute that option, we'd either ask them for another deposit to sign a lease for the future. The price would increase because now we're taking into account future appreciation, and we'd lock them in for another lease term. Or we would move on to another lease option buyer candidate and put them into the property. So this, if they decided to execute the option at the end of their lease, just doing simple math, they owe $215. So now if they buy us out in 3 years, we get the spread between whatever's left on this mortgage here and this $215,000 here. Keep in mind, this is going to be less because it's an amortizing loan at 6.5%. So let's just call it 215 minus 150 for simple math. That would be a $65,000 payout at the end of the 3rd year if they decided to execute their option. So that's deal number 21 up in Buffalo, New York. Very simple that you're finding. We are closing in on the end of the 25 by 25 challenge. We have a couple more videos on the way about property acquisitions, and we'll see if I can get there by the end of the year, because it's mid-November right now and the clock is ticking. So if you think I can get there, or maybe you don't think I can get there, comment below, subscribe, stay tuned for the next deal, and I'll catch you on the next one.